following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
Hello and welcome to this brand new edition of Global Lens on News9 Live. Our focus continues to be on the Israel-Hamas conflict. Is the Israel-Hamas war set to escalate significantly? Israeli forces have dropped leaflets warning Palestinians to flee parts of southern Gaza, signaling a possible expansion of their offensive to areas which Israel had earlier claimed were safe for civilians. Remember, for weeks together, Israel had asked Palestinian people to evacuate northern Gaza on the grounds that the north is the hub of Hamas's military activity and terror infrastructure and would therefore be under heavy bombardment from its air force. And having paid heed to Israel's evacuation orders and advised that they would be safer in southern Gaza, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are now crowded into UN-run shelters and family homes in the south of the Strip. The question is, if the war expands to southern Gaza as well, where will the Palestinians go? Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council on Wednesday called for urgent and extended humanitarian pauses in fighting between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip for a sufficient number of days to enable full, rapid, safe and unhindered humanitarian access. After multiple failed attempts, the 15-member council finally reached an agreement on a resolution that calls for the immediate and unconditional release of the hostages as well. The United States, Russia and Britain, who are council veto powers, abstained from the vote. The remaining 12 members voted in favor. The United States has backed pauses while Russia has pushed for a ceasefire. The text of the resolution does not condemn the Hamas attacks on Israel. This has been a point of contention for Israel's ally, the US and the UK. The resolution demands compliance with international law, specifically the protection of civilians, especially children. It also calls on all parties not to deprive civilians in Gaza of basic services and humanitarian aid needed for their survival. It welcomes the initial limited deliveries of aid but calls for it to be increased. Israel was furious with the resolution and lashed out. Israeli ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, said, "The UN Security Council's resolution is disconnected from reality and meaningless. Regardless of what the Council decides, Israel will continue acting according to international law, while the Hamas terrorists will not even read the resolution, let alone abide by it. It is unfortunate that the Council continues to ignore, not condemn or even mention the massacre that Hamas carried out on the 7th of October, which led to the war in Gaza. It is truly shameful." The envoy went on to say Hamas's strategy is to deliberately deteriorate the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip and increase the number of Palestinian casualties in order to motivate the UN and the Security Council to stop Israel from taking further action. That will not happen. Israel will continue to act until Hamas is destroyed and the hostages are returned, he said. Late last month, the 193-member UN General Assembly adopted a resolution that called for an immediate humanitarian truce and demanded aid access to the Gaza Strip and protection of civilians. Israel has vowed to wipe out Hamas, which rules Gaza, striking the enclave of 2.3 million Palestinians from the air, imposing a siege and invading with soldiers and tanks. Gaza health officials say at least 11,500 Palestinians are confirmed killed. Over 4,600 of them were children and at least 3,100 were women. And these figures have not been updated for the last 4 days due to the crumbling healthcare infrastructure. Israeli forces have been operating in and around Gaza's biggest hospital, Al-Shifa, a chief objective in its campaign to destroy Hamas. The Israeli Defense Forces say Hamas stores weapons and runs a command center in tunnels beneath the Al-Shifa hospital building. Israeli troops forced their way into the hospital in the wee hours of Wednesday and have spent 2 days now deepening their search. An army video shows automatic weapons, grenades ammunition and flak jackets, which they say were recovered from an undisclosed building within the hospital complex. Hamas has said, and I quote, "The occupation forces are still lying as they brought some weapons, clothes and tools and placed them in the hospital in a scandalous manner. We've repeatedly called for a committee from the United Nations, the World Health Organization and the Red Cross to verify the lies of the occupation." Israel began its campaign against the Islamist group after its terrorists rampaged through southern Israel on the 7th of October, leaving 1,200 Israelis, mostly civilians, dead. Almost 250 people were also taken hostage in the deadliest attack in Israel's 75-year history. Interestingly, US President Joe Biden has said that he's made it clear to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that a two-state solution is the only way to resolve the Israel-Palestinian conflict and that occupying Gaza would be a big mistake.
At this stage, the forces are sweeping the area, scanning and locating weapons of war and terrorist tunnels. IDF forces continue to operate at this hour in a targeted manner in Shifa Hospital. We launched this operation last night on Shifa, a location that we knew from intelligence-held terrorist infrastructure, and now we are deepening the operation. In the hospital, we found weapons, intelligence, military technology, and military equipment. Additionally, an operational command center and technological assets belonging to Hamas. The technology and the materials have been sent to intelligence for inspection and review. Our forces continue to operate inside the hospital in a targeted fashion based on our intelligence to uncover and eliminate terrorist activity in the hospital.
Yesterday, I met for the second time with families of Israeli hostages being held in Gaza. I heard and felt their pain and heartache. WHO continues to call for the hostages to be released unharmed and without any condition. We're deeply concerned for their health and well-being, just as we are concerned for the health and well-being of the people of Gaza, which is becoming more precarious every hour. For the past 3 days, WHO has not received updates on the number of deaths or injuries in Gaza, which makes it harder for us to evaluate the functioning of the health system. What we know is that only 1/4 of Gaza's hospitals are still functioning. 26 out of 36 hospitals are now closed, either due to damage, attacks, or because they have run out of fuel. Patients, health workers, and ambulances are not able to enter or exit some hospitals. Prior to the conflict, there were around 3,500 hospital beds across Gaza. Today, there are an estimated 1,400, and there are many more patients than beds. Doctors and nurses are having to make impossible decisions on who lives and who dies.
I made it clear to the Israelis that to Bibi and to his war cabinet that I think the only ultimate answer here is a two-state solution that's real. We got to get to the point where there is an ability to be able to even talk without worrying about whether or not we're just dealing with, they're dealing with Hamas that's going to engage in the same activities they did over the past, on the 7th. So but I can't tell, I'm not a fortune teller, I can't tell you how long it's going to last. But I can tell you I don't think it ultimately ends until there's a two-state solution. I made it clear to the Israelis I think it's a big mistake for them to think they're going to occupy Gaza and maintain Gaza. I don't think that works.
Have you communicated to Prime Minister Netanyahu any sort of deadline or time frame for how long you are willing to support Israel in this operation? Are you comfortable with the operation going on indefinitely, and is there any deal underway to free hostages?
With regard to when is this going to stop, I think it's going to stop when the when Hamas no longer maintains the capacity to murder and abuse and just do horrific things to the Israelis. And and they still think that, at least as of this morning, they still thought they could. They've just been straight. And we, as I said, the thing that I find most assuring, you have a circumstance where the first war crime is being committed by Hamas by having their headquarters, their military, hidden under a hospital. And that's a fact. That's what's happened. Israel did not go in with a large number of troops, did not raid, did not rush everything down. They've gone in, and they've gone in with their soldiers carrying weapons, their guns.
Yet sadly, this resolution falls on deaf ears when it comes to Hamas and other terrorist organizations. On the 7th of October, savage Hamas terrorists launched a barbaric invasion into Israel, murdering, raping, and brutalizing innocent civilians. Nearly 6 weeks have passed. This council has convened on the matter almost 10 times and still has not succeeded in condemning Hamas's October 7th massacre. The resolution focuses solely on the humanitarian situation in Gaza, yet makes no mention of what led up to this moment.
The Security Council should have called for a ceasefire a long time ago. It should have called for a ceasefire now. It should have heeded the call by the UN and every humanitarian organization on earth calling for a humanitarian ceasefire, including the Secretary General of the United Nations. It should have been convinced that there is no military solution, especially one that relies on the commission of atrocities, and it should have advanced political ones.
Ultimately, the United States could not vote yes on a text that did not condemn Hamas or reaffirm the right of all member states to protect their citizens from terrorist attacks. The Council repeatedly has made clear that we stand against all acts of terror. This horrific attack must be no exception. And the United States will continue to urge this Council to condemn Hamas's actions.